Hello, it is my great pleasure to welcome Mohanad Yaqubi, the guest of the 17th Subversive Film Festival. He is a filmmaker, a producer, and one of the founders of Idioms Films, an art house production company based in Ramallah. He is also a member of the curatorial collective called Subversive Film, which seeks to redistribute and research militant cinema in Palestine and beyond. And he is a resident researcher at the Kask School of Arts in Ghent. He prepared for us a wonderful masterclass about practicing archives of resistance. And he's been traveling all day. His flight was a bit delayed. So please give him a warm welcome. And
Thank you, Dina. Thank you, Subversive Film Festival. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for waiting. I'm sorry for the delays. Yeah, it's. I mean, we know about this festival for a long time, and we were always wondering when Subversive Film, the collective, will be doing screening or be in dialogue with Subversive Film Festival itself. We have many friends in common, and we don't see that our missions are different in that sense. So, of course, when we called our collective Subversive Film, we didn't know that there was a festival called Subversive Film Festival. And yeah, so this whole concept of archives and resistance, it became much more clearer for us in the collective maybe 3-4 years ago. Before that, we were more into this conventional classical concept of archiving militant cinema, archiving transnational solidarity cinema, and trying to bring it back more in the conservation of this kind of cinema, and not able to see how active and how important for our people, our communities, not only in Palestine, but all around the world, this whole concept of memory and remembering, and how is that important in creating a sense of resistance to the current state of the world, I would say. And how that the act of remembering and the act of archiving is actually an act of resistance, rather than being only a scientific process in that sense. Subversive Film, it started in 2011 by three people. It was myself, Reem Shille, who's Serbian Palestinian, and Nick Deans, who's a British academic. And the concept, it came out of necessity of making this collective. We started in 2008. I was doing my master's at Goldsmith in London. And when I was in one of the lectures about the third cinema, the teacher at that moment, she looked at me and she asked me, "Are you a Palestinian?" I said yes. And she asked me, "Do you know Mustafa Abu Ali?" And I actually knew him. And I said, "Yes, I know him, but I don't know anything about him." And she started to talk about this whole network of filmmakers, how Mustafa Abu Ali would meet Jean-Luc Godard in Amman, or how Jean-Luc Godard will meet Koji Wakamatsu and Masao Adachi in Cannes, and how Santiago Alvarez and Masao Adachi would meet on Oran. So, and somehow starting to speak about a network of filmmaking, of militant and committed filmmaking. that made me surprised. I was still young, I mean, young at that moment, and young who wanted to study cinema outside in London. And when I go there, I realized that actually my own history of cinematic history, our own history, cinematic history, is actually part of that. That made me a bit, of course, proud, happy, all of these things. But at the same time, I suddenly also realized, like, why don't we know about this? And how does memory works? And who actually preserves history and for what purposes? And that's when I started working on the first feature film, Off Frame, aka Revolution Until Victory. The only evidence I had at that moment in 2009, it was ACAR, a film by Jean-Luc Godard and Anne-Marie Maville. They made it in 73, 74. And that was the only reference for me for this whole world of militant cinema. And obviously for us. But the collective came a bit after, because once I got that access to that film, I looked at the credits of that film, and then I started to bring out names. And from that credits of that film, I start to know other names. And from other names, I start to see, for example, Vertov Film Group and their work in the UK, for example, or their work about the strikes in France. And after that, slowly getting more titles, getting more names, doing my research, doing a bit of research on the Palestinian militant cinema of the 60s and 70s. By 2011, I already had access to like 10, 15 films, which there was no text actually written about them. At that moment, I believed that there was no text, but then a little bit research, we found there was actually there's a whole text, but was not translated. So we found text, for example, in ex-Yugoslavia. We found text in Corriere do Cinema, scattered, not translated. Everything is kind of all around the world. And that's when we came together at that moment, and we said, I mean, a documentary, at the end of the day, I will make one documentary, but it will never be able to cover and will not give justice to the topic itself, to the research. Documentary is a film format, and film format depends on the narrative, and narrative is actually based on oblivion. So it's the art of what do you show and what do you hide. So in a film, there is a necessity in somehow to hide things, which doesn't serve research. When we are doing a certain research on a certain history, that it's hidden, and hidden for a political reason. Hidden because the political parties who were part of that militant movement disappeared, like the Italian Communist Party, for example, where all of their archive disappeared, scattered, it changed names. So instead of looking at the Italian Communist Party archive, now you look at something, we call it AMOT, which is the archive of the labor archive, Italian labor archive. And it has things change like that everywhere in the world. So we thought that let's make a collective, and a collective with the name of redistributing, translating, republishing material around the period of militant cinema in Palestine. At the beginning, it was Palestine because that was our interest. And then we realized that we can't understand Palestine without understanding the wider transnational network that's around it, because we felt at the beginning also that Palestinian cinema was a unique thing, but then you realized after that we can't understand Palestinian cinema until we understand the whole cinema movement, the militant cinema movement that was going around from Cuba, Chile, in Algeria, in Vietnam, the solidarity movement in Europe, and the Palestinian militant cinema was actually an inheritant of most of these aesthetical, cinematic militant aesthetics. So that's how we started with subversive film, and we decided that by doing projects, so we get commissioned to screen, make film programs, and we use the resources from these film screenings to republish and make catalogs, make subtitles, and because films, whether they are in Arabic, we needed to do English subtitle, or an English subtitle to make Arabic subtitle. Another element in that process was catalogs. We got fascinated by film catalogs because they were the source of information for many of these films. We will, in many cases, we won't find the film itself, but we will find information about it, and this information would exist in a catalog. So we somehow decided to make publications as a way to extend the life of information about films. So if we found a catalog, we will republish the catalog, but we will add as well our introduction to it, also give it more of our time kind of design, and somehow. The first project like the first kind of collective that came together, it was in 2012, called Al-Jisr. Al-Jisr means the bridge in Arabic, and the bridge, it's basically the Allenby Bridge. The Allenby Bridge, it's a bridge that connects between Jordan and Palestine, and it was called Allenby because, you know, after the British mandate in 1917, many things were called Allenby. So they have Allenby Street, Allenby Bridge, Allenby Building, Allenby River, whatever, kind of like renaming according to the victorious, which is something that happens everywhere. But what is very significant about this Al-Jisr, this bridge, you know, this is Jordan River, so it's also a kind of a holy river for many of the Christian sects. And this bridge connected the two banks, the West Bank and the East Bank, which is Jerusalem. In 1967, the bridge was destroyed by a bomb. And at the same time, many people wanted to flee because it was the moment where Israel occupied the West Bank. They already occupied the 48, and they established the State of Israel, which created a huge movement of refugees from inside. So from cities around Jaffa, Haifa, Lid, Ramle, all of these people went to West Bank. And from 48 to 67, there was like established some refugee camps in the West Bank. And when the 67 happens, basically Israeli army went into West Bank to occupy it. Many people were still living the trauma of the 48, so they start running away. There was a cameraman who was working for the Jordanian TV called Hani Jawhariya. And Hani Jawhariya, he's from Jerusalem. And he had a camera at that moment. And he was one of the, I think there was another photographer, but he was the only one with a 60mm camera who filmed the fleeing of many of these refugees through a destroyed bridge. And and somehow he documented his own immigration, his own diaspora. And people were going always from the west to east in that bridge, in that destroyed bridge. What we did in this catalog, I will go to it maybe. So what we did in this catalog was we decided to this scene that Hani Jawhariya filmed became very iconic. It was used in many Palestinian and international films that came after that, almost in the same editing format. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. So we made a catalog, a film catalog based on this sequence. So we selected the films that are in this catalog, in this film program, according to one scene. And the idea was that we are using only the images of that. I don't know why is it a bit like smaller. Like it should be. So we selected the films according. The only connection between all of these films are that they use the same scene in it. And what we did after that, we took out all of these scenes, all of the same scene, reconstructed the original scene from all of these films, and we made them very slow. So it was like maybe the whole sequence is 5 minutes, but then when we project it, it becomes kind of around 45 minutes. And we printed this catalog of the film. And suddenly we realized actually we are putting different political orientations and political understanding and ideologies in one place. So a film like Al-Fatih by Luigi Pirelli, which is made by the Italian Communist Party. La Louvière, which is by Vincent Cinema Group Cinema Vincent, which is a Maoist film group that came out of the May 68 movement in France. Medina, it's another film by a Jordanian director made as a kind of an Arab propaganda, Arab nationalist propaganda. Different orientation. Oppressed People Are Always Right. It's a Danish film by Niels Vest, who is one of the founders of Christiania. So also coming out from the anarchist movement in the Nordic countries. Palestine, it's by a German filmmaker very close to the RAF as well, using the same scenes, you can see these scenes, they are almost the same. I wish we have internet, I could have showed you that, but it's fine. Jordanian Report, it's a Russian actually film that we found at that moment, a Russian film that we found at the Central Documentary Archive in Moscow. At that moment, we were only accessing these films through catalogs. So that's why we somehow, can we make a catalog? The idea was, can we make a film catalog, a film program catalog without having actually the film program itself? So we didn't produce a film program because we didn't have access to all of these films. We knew about them. Some of them we got low quality MPEG-4 or small, like not suitable for big screenings. So that's why we decided that maybe we only make a catalog, and this catalog can be the reference for a future program. We never made the film program. I think it's interesting to think about it after that. So Aftermath, it's a film made by the UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Relief, and which it's also a total different orientation, it's made by a humanitarian agency that they don't even call the people in the film Arab Palestinians, they call them Arab refugees, and they never explained what was the political problem of people crossing a broken bridge in that sense. And we made also like kind of a small account of Hani Jawharieh, the guy who filmed this scene, where we realized actually that he is one of the founders of the Palestine Film Unit. Palestine Film Unit was a militant film unit. It's the first Palestinian militant film unit that was established in '68 in Amman, and they affiliated with themselves with the Al-Fatah, the Palestinian Liberation Movement. And they made several films. They actually were the people who filmed many of the Palestinian revolutionary movement training in the camps, all of this propaganda, Palestinian propaganda images and rhetorics that actually are living with us maybe until today in many ways, and it actually inspired a lot of the filmmakers to join this revolution or to make films about it. So it's rarely hard to find any committed filmmaker from that period that haven't done films about Palestine, and it's because of this film unit that inspired, that used efficiently the format of filmmaking. So yeah, we made this film, and the film was an experimental. So we slowed down all of these images. After that, what we did, we became very obsessed with the concept of catalogs and programming only in catalogs. So we were not really looking for the format, the original films, the 60 millimeter reel. At the same time, this was coming out because I was still working on the research of Off-Frame, which will be shown tomorrow, I think. And every time I'm meeting someone, we're going to meet someone, one of these filmmakers, they will give us the films, they will give us a scan, and I will make an interview with them for the film. But then I edit, I use I take what I want from them for the film, which is maybe 1 or 2 minutes out of films that are 1 hour or 2 hours. So the leftovers and somehow were utilized by Subversive Film, the collective, and actually this became the archive. The second catalog we made was called Armed Struggle, or it was called Palestine in the Eye, Militant Moving Image. And it was, again, we kept and somehow our fascination with Hani Jawhariya, with this character, a tragic character. I'll tell you what happened with him after that. But at the beginning of his career, he filmed his own diaspora. He was born in Jaffa, and in 48, when the occupation of Jaffa happened and the state of Israel established, his family had to move to Jerusalem. He's originally from Jerusalem, but they were living in Jaffa. So, and then again, 67, he had to move again to Amman and do that. So Mustafa Abu Ali, the guy I mentioned before, him and Hani Jawhariya went to study cinema in London in 1964. And after they finished their studies, they came back to Amman and they established this Palestine film unit, and they had like a very exciting film career. They were invited to many film festivals. They made several films together. In 1977, Hani Jawhariya was killed while he was filming in Lebanon during the civil war. He was killed by a shell. And his companion Mustafa Abu Ali made a film about Hani Jawhariya. The film was called Palestine in the Eye. It's fascinating to watch this film because, and this is one of the last films that we kind of found. And it's fascinating because it's a film that is actually documenting or archiving the history of a film unit while the revolution is happening. So it was telling us the history of this unit while they are in the struggle, which usually this is not something that happens. Usually in revolutions, they will start talking about history when the moment of victory happens. So Algerians made films about the Algerian Revolution after victory. Cubans, the same thing. In many places around the world, in Mozambique was the same case. In Vietnam was the case. When you are in a revolution, you make a film for mobilization. You make film to either to address a political issue or to direct the audience or gather support, but to make a film about victory that will come. that was the fascinating part. That was why we got hooked with this film and this kind of tragic character, which is Hani Jawhariya. And we made this catalog, another catalog. Again, it's called Palestine in the Eye, Militant Moving Images. Why are we here? Sorry. Subversive. Sorry. But the interesting part that this time we decided to make it as a film cycle as well. So we worked on, first of all, subtitling the film Palestine in the Eye, which called Palestine fil Ayn. The copy that existed was only in Arabic, and it was a VHS scan of the film, but nevertheless we subtitled that film. And around this film, so what we did, we made the film loop on a screen for the whole time of the exhibition, and we made a film program from several films that responded to of internationalist practices around Palestinian cinema. And we selected these films, which are one of them, the one that we had before, La Louvière by Vincent Cinema Group. We managed to get a good copy, and we actually met with the directors, some of them who were still around there. It's a fascinating film because it's a film that is made in 75, but at the same time it was aware that the Palestinian struggle was not only outside, because the Palestinian revolution was mainly focused in Lebanon and in Jordan. But La Louvière, because of the fact that the filmmakers were French, they managed actually to get into the occupied territories. They filmed several of the demonstrations, the strikes against the detention, the arrest of Palestinians without trials by the occupational forces, and this is the first film that puts the inside and the outside together in a fascinating way. So that was one of the films, La Louvière. Another film that we also selected was Red Army PFLP Declaration of World War, which is a film by Okuju Wakamatsu and Masawa Adachi. And it's also another solidarity perspective of the Palestinian struggle from the Japanese and the Japanese Red Army. At that time, it was fascinating as well to discover what is the Japanese Red Army and this whole mythology around the Japanese who were hiding in the refugee camps and making films in collaboration with the PFLP. PFLP is the Palestine Front, Popular Front to Liberating Palestine, which is the Marxist political party or the left of the Palestinian revolution. So also there were more of the internationalist revolutionaries. They were believing that the pressure should be more into the media. That's why they also made several hijacking events, hijacking operations. Well, some of them obviously ended up in a tragic way, but it's there is no liberation without sacrifice. And the other one was The Fifth War by Monika Maure. Monika Maure is a German filmmaker who joined the Palestinian revolution around the 70s, end of the 70s, 77, 78. And The Fifth War is a reference for the Fifth War. So to follow the Palestine, like the history, the first war was 48, 67, 73, No, 48, 56, which is the Suez War, and then 73, 67, 73, and the fifth war was the invasion of the south of Lebanon, where it was a very interesting moment where a lot of the progressive Arab left movement were supporting the Palestinian fighters and militias, and they fought together, stopping the Israeli from invading Lebanon, and they managed to stop them beyond Nahr al-Litani. So Vanessa Redgrave is the person who was presenting this film. We know, I mean, I never heard of Vanessa Redgrave until that moment, and then I realized who's Vanessa Redgrave. And it's kind of making another film as well, which is 100 Faces of a Single Day by Christian Ghazi. Christian Ghazi was more closer to the DFLP, which is the Democratic Front of Liberating Palestine, which is, I think they were the Leninists, not the Marxists. So they were more closer to the Soviet Union, working more with the East German GDR at that time. And he also made an amazing film between fiction, documentary, experimenting in 72, in 71, making a very experimental sonic landscape based on radio frequencies. The whole premise of the film is actually based on this messages that the families who were separated in 48 were sending through the radio channels by radio to their family who stayed in Palestine, telling them their everyday news. So like, my uncle just got married, my aunt had a daughter, my son married, we have a family, we moved to a new. So this kind of frequencies, and he plays of these kind of frequencies all of the time. What we try to do here, that in this catalog also, that it's we wanted to see how international solidarity corresponded to the death of the killing of Hani Jawharieh, one of that militant figures in the Palestinian cinema of that time. That's why we didn't put any Palestinian filmmakers or Palestinian films, except the film of Mustafa Abu Ali, which is Palestine in the Eye, and played together. We printed that. We also had the film, Mustafa Abu Ali's film, Palestine in the Eye, to be central in the place, and then it was a film program playing all the time, a film program looping according to a certain program. So this is where we started as well, to feel like, we needed to experiment more. Like we start at this time, we started to have more access to material. We've already did some interviews. Then it came another project which was called Splicing the Militant Image, which is a film lecture. No, I will talk about the syllabus. Perpetual Recurrences, so Splicing Militant Images, which was a film lecture that cast a look of how revolutionary performs itself inside films producing during the period of Palestinian Revolution. And it was a lecture of looking at how the films, how can we actually present film experts from an array of films produced specific around the Palestinian context, but also make it as an indication for other collaboration. We were very fascinated by international solidarity movement, and that's actually the lecture that took us to Belgium after that, and we moved there because we founded several connections and many interesting people who were working on this. And this is another, in 2014, we made a proposal around non-alignment movement, and a kind of looking at the non-alignment movement as a way to address the Palestinian revolution. One of members of the Subversive Film, her father was actually at the PLO office, one of in Belgrade, which was the first PLO office in Europe. And he was I met him and he was always telling us the stories about Arafat hiding as a student, meeting Tito, meeting figures of the Yugoslavian or like the People's Party, and trying to rather than getting weapons, he was more interested in getting people to get Palestinian to get to do scholarships and to finish their studies in Yugoslavia. And also there were several traces of this archive and this connection between the PLO and Yugoslavia that was left in the archive. The proposal was made in order to address it more, to go deeper in it, but we didn't yet. There was also another connection because we realized as well that the connection between Yugoslavia and Palestine is not related only to the non-alignment. It was also related to, it is the non-alignment, but it's also related to the UN peace forces, where Yugoslavia sent several soldiers in order to keep peace in Gaza. And the grandfather of Reem, the member of Subversive Film, actually showed us like a medal he got when he served in Gaza in 56. And that's also opens another open research, but we didn't continue with this. It's not, we have a link for a full proposal, but the whole idea, again, it's, we are always proposing as a collective. It's more of a proposal. Sometimes we go deeper in the research. Sometimes we keep the proposals as a way of communicating with other collectives and other groups. And this idea of having excerpts from films, that we take scenes from certain films and we put them and we try to see how they make in dialogue with each other was... Can we have internet? Yeah? How can I connect? Because I would like to show some of the perpetual recurrences, this idea of sequences, how they work together. So this film, we selected scenes from, like for example, teachers or classroom scenes from 6-7 films together, and we put them together. That kind of generates a whole imagination of what... I don't have... Oh. To set up anything, just directly. Few minutes. Okay. Allow. Maybe it maybe it's done the Wi-Fi. Can anyway, we're watching a film after, so it's fine. It's okay. So perpetual recurrences is this arrangement or trial of arrangement of different scenes from the Palestinian militant cinema and militant revolution, Palestinian revolution. It's an exercise in programming film rather than curating a selection of entire films. This exercise curates a selection of scenes. They appear to be montaged as they are, but the core of the exercise is to look at recurring patterns we got fascinated with this concept of patterns. It was interesting to see that even with different political ideological frameworks, the same patterns keeps on coming out again. The same patterns in terms of editing films. So you will see the same kind of structures happening. The political education, the people's will, demonstrations, the building up narratives around the lost. So around martyrs, the posters, working on posters of the martyrs, which is interesting because it's not that they are all together in the same we're sitting in the same room and editing. It was different people sitting in different editing rooms. At the same time, they were coming out with the same patterns. So we wanted to follow these patterns in the different films in the Palestinian cinema or cinema on Palestine. And the selected scenes gathered around each other to form a sequence, which is also it's again in the core of the filmic process of like how scenes make sequences, and what does it mean if the sequence is actually the same the same scene is repeated in the sequence. How does it create a pattern? And we tried to follow that in this film from the beginning of the Palestinian revolutionary cinema until today, and seeing how is that pattern or how this kind of editing actually manifests itself even in filmmakers like experimental modern Palestinian filmmakers like Basma Sharif, Mahdi Fleifel, and Michel Khleifi, for example. So it's also connecting the Oslo, the militant period, the 60s and 70s, with the post-Oslo cinema. And in somehow the political statement we were rallying around, that as long as like we could see the oppression, we could see the struggle of the people, even if they are hiding the political atmosphere is kind of oppressing, because this is what happened in Oslo time, that any demand of liberation was oppressed, because there is some group who said that we are the one who are responsible of your liberation, but that couldn't be hidden within the cinematic expression in that sense. We went after that again to the syllabus. Again, we start to follow with Hani Jawhariya. That's where the moment as well we start to realize that we are actually having an archive. In 2011 and 2012, we met with his widow. We documented, we photographed several documents that she had. But in 2017, we found this text. Now it's not very clear here. I don't know if we have it somewhere, but it was like 12, 13 pages. And at the beginning, we thought it was his diaries, but then we looked deeper into it, and it was actually a film course that Hani Jawhariya prepared, and he was giving to militants who were injured, and part of their rehabilitation was to give them a workshop into cinematography. It wasn't the only kind of workshop that these the injured militant were rehabilitated back into society. They would go into doing like electronic repairing, or they would do media, or they would do sewing, or like work on a factory. One of the courses actually that was given by the Palestinian Revolution was the cinematography, and it really made sense because injured militant will have the experience of dealing with the combat situation, so they will be able to be very close. And we thought, when I went through it very quickly, it was like, this is actually the catalog, the guide of how we make militant cinema. But then when we went to it, it was very boring, technical manifestation, education, like what is the focus, what is how to open the camera, the camera lens, the recording. But then the examples he was giving in this catalog or these papers were a bit extreme. So like, what do you do if you don't have a light meter? What do you do? How to take care of the camera when there is from dust? How to use he talks a lot about the speed shutter. So these are very technical terms in terms of using camera, but then when you translate that to the situation they were in, so it means someone is in the desert and they don't have accessibility to protect the cameras and they have to take extra care for that. Also, the speed shutter, it also means that you are always in a move. So you have to be able to control the speed shutter if you are filming from a moving car, for example, or you just suddenly jumped in a truck and you have to flee from a scene. Also talking about the lens and the opening of the lens, which is because in militant cinema, it's not, you don't control the cinematic atmosphere. You're not the one there to say yes, action, put the light, it's all about capturing things on the move and with extreme situations. And in this kind of courses you don't take in schools, you don't take in film schools. Maybe you take this kind of extreme situations if you are in the third year studying cinematography. And this is the flip in many ways, because it's rather than you are in control, which is a very capitalist also concept of you control the environment around the cinema. Well, you become part of the environment and you are there as one of the tools of the revolution that is under the same conditions, that you can't just pretend that you are not part of that and you want a certain conditions. So what we did, we transcribed all of this with, again, making sure that we are seeing what did he marked, what did some explanation. We did translate his transcriptions, and we made it all together, and we gave like examples of what he was trying to say through the images. The interesting part with this one, I don't know if we already got no. Wow. In 2014, this was 2017, yeah, in 2017 or 18, there is a collective in Egypt called Musirrin, and they are a collective that came out with the Egyptian, like the Arab Spring Revolution in Egypt and throwing out Mubarak from power. And they also believed in public education, public media, and that people are making the media. And it was fascinating to realize suddenly that they didn't read Hani Jawhari's notes, obviously, but they produced a very similar catalog or similar syllabus to teach people who never went into film school, people who doesn't even have proper education of like how to deal in situations where they are in demonstrations, how to protect their cameras, how to like basic relationship with the cinematic world, cinematic film image production. And so we put these two syllabus together and we made a dialogue with Musirrin, which we also produced, and we made it part of this publication. So, and somehow we are always been, the collective has always been interested in studying everything around cinema rather than the cinema itself. So, and this is because of in Palestine there is no archives. It's not like you go and you open, you go register somewhere and you access all of this. Many of this way of producing it's producing text is actually a need to produce archive, an archive of something that is being lost, and to reimagine something that existed in somehow. In 2020, I hope we found resounding archives. Yeah. What is this now? Sorry, it's a new laptop, so I'm not... Resounding archive. So, in 2020, we in somehow realized suddenly that we, 10 years working... Force quit. In 2020, we realized that we have been working, don't send, man, that we've been working with doing a lot of interviews with filmmakers from the period of 60s, 70s militant cinema. And we suddenly, because it was Corona as well, we wanted to go and revisit these archives that we created ourselves. So we made this, it was our first audio project. It's called Resounding Archives. And we edited these interviews. We made like around 30 interviews with these filmmakers. Some of them actually passed away as well. So, and we edited 8 of these interviews, and we were putting them on a local radio in Palestine beside another local radio in Belgium. And they were with Niels Vest, Monica Maure, Khadija Habashne, Serge Lapiron, Masawa Adachi, Alan Bernstein, Assam Nassar, Akram Zatari, Luqman Slim. And they are people who either worked with the Palestinian militant cinema or were part of it. Don't have internet? No. Okay, so with this is it's an audio project that also made us think again about what is an archive, and is it the archive is something you find or something you create, and if you are creating archives, what does that mean in many ways, and what does that mean if you are creating this archive in a context of liberation? What is the meaning of this kind of vitality, and somehow the ability of creating archive is a reaction or a reflection of being alive as well, because suddenly we realize that you are dead people, dead societies don't produce archive, they keep archives. Like, I mean, in many ways, I have these kind of dystopian imagination of Europe being only a place of archives. There is the only thing that exists is archives, and there is no production of new archive. We come here as academics, as researchers, to look at the archives, but no one is kind of producing more archives. And in other places, they don't care about the archive. Like, for example, I live in Belgium, I meet several Congolese artists, and they're never interested in the archive of the colonial time. They say this is the archive, their archive. We are now have our own archive, we produce our own archive, and we don't want to be controlled by the idea that they have our archive, that they have our memory. And I feel this is an idea, a concept that we also, as Subversive Film, as Palestinians, collective, that we don't want to be following, because that Israel always have our archive, and we always have to beg for them in order to give us our memory. And because that puts us always in the position of victims. Rather than that, let's go around the world and look for archives of solidarity. Let's look for archives that we create. If we find an image, the documentation we make of this image, the text we produce around this image is actually an archive. And actually this makes it our own archive that we are in control of, not the opposite. And this really came from this project that is Resounding Archive, when we suddenly realized that we don't have documents. Remember, this one picture, it's not very clear here, but this is this whole project came from this, which maktub here, the written here, Palestine Cinema Institute, the Unified Media, and it's a letter to Studio Baalbek. Studio Baalbek, it's a laboratory in Lebanon, and it was in 76 in Beirut. 76 in Beirut. Beirut was already divided into East and West Beirut. And this studio was in the East Beirut, which was for the right-wing militia was in control. So a Palestinian wouldn't be able to reach that place. And there they were saying, Yurja Taslim, we want you to give the person who have this letter all of the other films that hasn't been delivered with the invoices so we can pay it. And it's signed by Hani Jawhariya here عن المؤسسة. Next year, almost the same time, he was killed. So this is one picture, one archive, one paper that we found by a coincidence. It's not an archive. But what is the archive is what we did around it, what happens around it, asking, building the memory, building the heritage, recording the audio, asking about how to, getting maps of where was the studio and where was the office of the Palestine Film Institute or Cinema Institute, kind of reimagining a track of a person who will be carrying this letter. That was the archive for us. Now, from this perspective came this project that is called Tokyo Reels, which is still an ongoing project we are working on. And Tokyo Reel, basically, we were showing the film Off-Frame, the first film we made in 2016, was showing it in Tokyo in 2017. And after the screening, someone came to me and gave me a list of this list that was like printed on A4. There was several names in Japanese, and imagine that we have been working for, at that time, almost like 9 years on militant cinema and Palestinian militant cinema, and suddenly in Japan somebody gives us a letter or a piece of paper which contained films that we didn't know about. Obviously that intrigued the whole process, and we wanted to know more about this collection. In order to access this collection, they were all in 16 millimeter, and we managed to get a scanner at that moment, and we moved all of this archive, so this is where we went into the room in Tokyo, which had this films and this archive, and suddenly we realized that this is one of the what we call the imperfect archives. Imperfect archives is a concept that comes from imperfect cinema, which is a text by my mind is now cooked. Who wrote the word imperfect? Spinoza, Julio Spinoza. And we had this imagination that imperfect cinema can only exist in imperfect archives. And imperfect cinema for Spinoza is a cinema that is always looking for perfection. And it's cinema that is made by people. And it's always subjected to editing and changing. And it's not about making the film as a product, a place of a product, but it's a place of dialogue. The same thing we wanted to imagine archives. So the archives of militant cinema is a place of dialogue rather than a place of keeping objects. And that's where we tested with this kind of collection, because it's a collection that is in a home, that is not in a structure where you can't change. We wanted to create the inventory of these films and this collection with the collectors themselves, the Japanese activist movement, which also there is no account about them. Many filmmakers and artists made work on the Japanese Red Army and their involvement with the Palestinian, but that's like as a local solidarity movement in Japan that was actually coming from the non-gentrification, anti-gentrification movement, was coming from the anti-occupational movement, anti-American occupational movement in Japan. And they are more of a transnational solidarity movement because it was not only about Palestine, it was about anti-apartheid, they were anti-Vietnam War, they were for example, this film, the anti-fascist in Spain. So we found different elements in their collection that is not only about Palestine, but at the same time, it's not registered. It's not registered in the state. And when we asked them about this, they said, yeah, we are still in struggle. If we give all of this to a formal state archive, we will never be able to access it again. Now we can take a photograph of something and we make our own like a design on it. We add our words on it. If it was in a perfect archive in that sense, it will become locked. It will become a formal narrative. And we kind of loved this idea, and this is where we worked with them together in making a new inventory. The idea for us as Subversive Film is to use what we know, a little bit of our knowledge about these films, and try to make a full inventory of the 20 reels, 16 millimeter reels we found. These are the reels we were given, actually, we were not found. And these are the reels. We flew them from Japan to Brussels. We made the scanning on this machine, and we did something we called forensic documentation. So it's not about documenting the object, but also kind of studying everything in the object. So we did photograph, even in the back, in the front, all of the details that are in the films. We also when we did the scanning, we were not only interested in scanning the films itself, but we were interested in scanning what is written in the negative. And here we suddenly realized as well that there is a whole tradition of Japanese independent film screening, that the projectionists were sending each other messages through what they write or scratch on the negative itself. And we put all of that together in one place as a way of understanding the politics and of this solidarity movement, and actually writing the account, a historical account out of the material that this solidarity movement produced. It was not possible for us to meet these people because they're not an organization. They're one person, two persons moving around. There were people with them. They're not anymore with them. Other people came. Like now, this group is activated again after what happened in Palestine since 7 October. Sorry, this is how it looks now after we did with this documentation. And this is how the inventory looks like from how was missing a lot of information, and it became now we know all of the films, the length, the production, the year of production, the country of production. And we started to we do what Subversive Film is, what we always do. We subtitled all of the films into English, Japanese, and Arabic. And we did all of this we transcript all of these films, made them into catalogs. So basically the last 10 years, what we've been doing came accumulated, the experience accumulated in this collection. This is part of the catalogs, how we did them. This picture is the 20 catalogs. When we put each together, you open the catalog and you find all of the information, the year of production, all of the credits made. And as a way, it's a gift giving back to the access to the Japanese audience, as Japanese activist, which at that time when we finished this project was 2022. And we were thinking that this is okay, we're going back to the underground, but suddenly this has been used a lot in Japan, and it's been a lot of the activists now are screening these films. They're asking for the digital because we made all of the films into digital formats. They're screening it in streets, in independent cinemas, and somehow revived again the tradition of political screening. We made a film festival out of it, and I mean, it's another, this is the artistic practice, but this is not the most important thing for us. It was more how we did this inventory and how we brought these films back. It's not just a metaphor. It became an active practice and somehow. And yeah, all of this exists on a website, so tokyoreels.com. You can download not the films but you can request to watch the films, but you can download all of these catalog. Now we are working on, starting from Palestine, but looking at the transnational solidarity movement, trying to do recurring perpetual recurrences project in combination with Tokyo Reel, looking at collections, imperfect collections like the Palestinian collection, but in different places. Because, for example, in Germany, there is a collection by German activists doing for the Polisario. In Spain or in Portugal, there is a big collection with different people about the struggle in Mozambique. In ex-Yugoslavia, in different places, in Belgrade, there is also several collections about African struggles. So we are trying to find a pattern, not through the films, but through the collections, and how people benefit or work around archiving, and if we put the different inventories of these struggles or collections together, what kind of pattern will be produced and somehow. And this is who we are, Subversive Film. I wish the rest were here, and thank you. Maybe open for questions. Subversive Film Festival.
Can I ask something about?
Please, yes.
I'm just waiting to what you just said. Because, I knew very little about you, and I'm sorry at your house that's showing that I saw on the internet that your home was destroyed recently in Palestine. And I just wanted to ask you what I heard the Jewish scholar Norman Finkelstein said recently. He said that he's very surprised by his students' movements in governments in the States. And I'm wondering, are you surprised as well? Because I think this was a sign of hope.
I don't know. Frankenstein, he's a bit of a pessimist person, but I know him personally, but of course, yeah.
And he said he was surprised. And are you surprised? Is this time hope that maybe colonialism will be destroyed? And
I don't think colonialism will be destroyed, but maybe the racist regime in Israel will be dismantled. That's the hope. We're not talking about the destruction of Israel. We're talking about the dismantling of the racist mechanism, structure of that state. And I was not surprised. I'm so happy to see it. And I teach a lot about the May 68 and how it happened suddenly in France without any preparation. It was a surprise for many people, and nobody knew how to deal with it. But I don't think it's important to be looking at the reasons as much as to be supportive of the movement itself. And it's to what's fascinating for me today, that this work, these kind of films, and many of the films that is about transnational solidarity from the past, but also young Palestinian filmmakers are putting their films for free to be screened in these encampments. And that's the fascinating part for me. I think it's the awareness from the filmmakers, because for a while I felt I'm also a filmmaker, so I come from that. I just came from Cannes, so it's just coming from this capitalist, greedy, looking at cinema as entertainment. But then I was so happy, so surprised to see that filmmakers still believe and are still aware of the role of films. and they're not only trapped by the need to get screening fees or to make money out of their films. They were suddenly giving their films, and many of them contacted these encampment. Anyone is from the encampment is contacting these filmmakers, including the films that you're gonna see in the festivals. They are like now at 10 tonight. I'm talking in Edinburgh. They have a screening in an encampment. I make sure that I want to speak to the student because it's about teaching. It's a teach-in around Palestine. That is what is more important at this moment. Maybe change will not come. I mean, I don't know. I lost hope, and somehow I don't think change will come tomorrow or next year. But maybe this generation in 10, 15 years will be in a position that a change can happen.
So you have hope.
Of course, hope is the only thing we have. Very much.
Can I ask one question? When as like the cinema movement was very focused on a camera as a machine, and it was camera as a machine, and it was usually compared to a gun in a way. How do you see it today when the like low resolution images been somehow also appropriated by military forces, but also by like different media that are putting it in a different context and somehow blurring the difference between truth and false? Like, do you still see like a potential like weapon, and especially in the context of Palestine, where like maybe also reference on the movie No Other Land that won the Biennale. I don't know, like maybe a lot of things, but I would like to hear maybe a reflection.
I mean, if the 20th century is the century of image, the 21st century is the century of archives. I don't think that in 20th century we were fascinated by the concept of making producing image. Now anyone produces images. Everybody knows what is the process behind what we see on cinema and in screen. And I think many people are able actually distinguish between what is real and what is fake. What becomes more interesting for us now is to see what does it mean to produce an image in many ways. And that's why I see it's fascinating to look at what has been produced in the 20th century and in the way that shaped our world today. Rather than producing more images, again, it's more accessible to anyone to produce images. But there is an interesting relationship with the technology and image in many ways. I mean, what made militant cinema is the 16 millimeter. It's suddenly that cameras are cheap, accessible. Films are accessible, while the 35 was much more harder to process, and it needs a state behind it. And that's why Godard he said that if 35 is the tank, the 16 is the Kalashnikov, which is basically this comparison between the state army and the guerrilla. And somehow that was very important, and it became much more accessible in the end of the 50s, where that's where also the students were reading more, were getting more toward liberal ideas, civil rights ideas, and the camera was their film. It's actually the same thing happened in the 2010, which they introduced the DSLR. These kind of cameras that were much more cheaper, because when I started working on cinema or film, I needed to buy a Sony or a Panasonic, which was $5,000-$6,000. And 2010, with $500, I can make a film. And which is also fascinating, because these cameras, when they came out, they were without sound, which brought us again to the beginning of cinema, where you are doing images and then you are making the sound separately. And it opened a whole new world of rediscovering cinema at that moment. And it became part of the whole movement of that time. And I don't know what other technological advancement we need for cinema, or to come back and believe in image. I don't believe that cinema is going to be a format after 100 years. I mean, we are going to only look at it as an archive. Because we are coming to an age where somebody will put a chip on our head and we will be able to produce images while we just blink in our eyes. So it's not, or we were gonna lose electricity. We don't have access to electricity, so all of this material will not be even accessible, except the catalogs that are written about them. Very dystopian, but I'm kind of.
How do you see how do you see that? Are you showing initial areas movies or movies about him in Palestine, and how does that affect the sentiment today? Does it affect?
Again, Palestine is very like, do you show it in Gaza makes more difference than showing it in West Bank. I mean, Gaza has been for the last 15, 16 years building on the rhetoric of resistance. Whether it's Islamic resistance or national resistance, or I mean, Gaza was since 15 years where Hamas, PFLP, Fatah, all of the factions are able to speak about resistance. And when we screen films like that, I mean, this film and the other films we made as well, we're screening a lot in Gaza. Even people were screening it in cultural centers. My cousins were screening them. I mean, it was very interesting. While in West Bank, it's this kind of images or the sound, like the resistance rhetorics and metaphors is against the neoliberal project. So there was a kind of resistance to watch this kind of images. So it's yeah, I mean, these films and the images are tools. They're not if there is an environment for this kind of tools, for this kind of ideology, these films will become an interesting tool for education. But you can't just show it to kids who are, or people who are going to coffee shops every night and they are thinking about other, like finding jobs in banks, and tell them, yalla, let's go do a revolution. While the other kids in Gaza or in the refugee camps in Lebanon, when they watch these kind of films, it gives them tools, hopes. They know how to produce language, first of all, but also graphics, aesthetics, that they can use as a base, as a reference when they are producing today. And that's why also these kind of films and material is important for the encampments today. They are more interested to see it. So Palestine, again, we always sit in this trap that Palestine is one thing. Palestine, it's different society, and that's the effect of the occupation. It's 670 years, and it's like the different Palestinian communities don't have the same education. So West Bank follows the Jordanian curriculum, Gaza followed the Egyptian curriculum. In Lebanon, they had a different curriculum, and inside Israel, so how can you really unite a community around the struggle, except by the time of the revolution? I mean, that's what the PLO in many ways managed to do. But the curse that the PLO leadership today is the one that is dismantling this history, and they don't want to have it. They prefer that this history being occupied, booted, and being stolen inside the Israeli archive. It's better for the existence of the PLO or the PA, because it always put them in the position of victims. Somebody who lost their archives, lost their memory, and they're always waiting for your occupier, your perpetrator to feel mercy on you, give you one film every 2-3 years. And the films are stripped out of any subversive criteria in it somehow. And that's why, I mean, when they always say I've been seeing this movement like our archive is lost. Our archive is not lost. Our archive is everywhere. Serge Lapiron, one of the directors of La Louvière, when he wrote about 82 in Corriere du Cinema, the French magazine, he said that the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 82, it made the Palestinian memory explode. And fragments of this memory landed everywhere in the shape of images, sound, reels, text. So wherever you go around the world, you will find this archive. It's not, but it's there. But why don't you can't put an archive without sovereignty and without will to make an archive of liberation?
Thank you.
Thank you.